absolutely Mercury. And so the presence of Mercury, the planet, makes itself felt, and it comes and eclipses the Earth from me. So I'm slowly moving back toward the Earth, and Mercury is standing there. Thank you. And Mercury is coming into view and eclipsing Earth. And stopped my passage back to Earth. So for a period of time, and I don't know whether it was 12 hours or 5 days, I am blocked from moving back through this death into resurrection. I'm blocked by the planet Mercury.
Prove to me that you are alive.
What up, everybody? Welcome back to Prove to Me that You're Alive. Before I introduce this amazing being, I have to say this. You know, in our age, our common enemy, the life haters, have been hijacking information. Everything from religion to archaeology to history is so twisted and distorted, you don't know where to look. I mean, even the people that we thought that were independent media are becoming controlled opposition sometimes without even realizing that they are controlled opposition. So people always ask me, Nas, how do you know if someone's being a cult leader? How do you know if someone's being controlled opposition? How do you know this or that? And I always tell people, look, how do you feel right after you listen to someone or after you interact with someone? Do you feel a building up energy or force? Or do you feel like you're sitting at home, you're paranoid, you're biting your nails, you're thinking that an asteroid is going to land on your head, you know, you're all scared? And there's your answer. Sometimes people always ask me like, hey, how does Sacha Stone never ages? There's your answer. It's the energy that builds. It's the energy that taps your inner self, cracks that code, man, where you want to come outside and experience this beautiful thing we call life. So today, my brother, this angelic being, man, our leader, our prophet, Sacha Stone, has been kind enough to come back, and I cannot thank him enough. I will do a little clap, of course, and Sacha Stone is back. Thank you so much for being back, man.
Well, it's a great pleasure. And, you know, just to speak to some of your opening comments there, which I thought were very interesting, you know, you speak about the defining factor of whether whether somebody is in truth or not is going to be felt by the witness, by the observer, and it's either an entropic force that's life depleting and leeches off your energy, and you feel depleted moving away from that venue, or it's a life affirming force that empowers and affirms and uplifts. So you're absolutely right about that. However, let me just say that what you'll find is that people who themselves are a vortex of entropic energy and are caught up in judgmentalism and identification and false light speculations and projections, they will naturally feel depleted in the presence of the angelic. People feel as though they're being leached off because it's them doing the leeching of themselves. They've become a feedback loop of the parasite energy, and all they can do is project that onto the other. So don't forget that, you know, the reason why avatars and saints and goodly souls get vilified and castigated and crucified is precisely because the unwashed have a tendency to project their own dark hearts onto the idol and thereby damn them and condemn them. So there are other weird, in a sense, laws of the spiritual metaphysics that apply. But as a rule of thumb, you're right. My way of gauging the being is the living being is to exchange fire in the eyes. And I've long known that the very first quantum instant of meeting someone and exchanging fire in the eyes, literally that fraction of a second that you first meet someone, engage in the eyes and shake the hand or whatever, that sends a packet of information through the fire in the eyes that actually gives you the full quanta of that individual. If you are present enough to receive, you will know mind, body, and soul whether this individual is an honorable, decent, good, life-affirming creature or a subhuman, false light merchant, whatever. You will know it all in that first flash, as long as you are fully present as the witness. So it comes back to that premise that we each of us need to navigate life through life using our psionic intelligence, our gut intelligence, not the heart, not the mind, but the psionic and typhonic consciousness of the gut instinct, which never lies.
Yeah. I can't say something so well, but I agree with everything you said. I'll just say this, that I'll say something more simple, that in the West, because reality is not as harsh as, let's say, the places I come from, like what we consider the third world. And what people do, they put on these masks and, they build up these barriers in order to, come off as tough or whatever. And a lot of times people, when I compliment someone or when I give someone flowers like I do to you, a lot of times people think, oh, you're sucking up or you this and that. I want to tell everyone this. It's because we have been through hell that we want to give you heaven. And we want to project that heaven into the world because we've seen the hell. And now we want to manifest this heaven, man. So everything that I say and I say about Sacha or about other guests, this is coming from my vibration. Again, I don't script anything, man. And I will repeat again and again that Sacha is, I can't even call you a human being anymore. You are a being, an angelic being that gave me such, force and energy. I was so built last time that we had this interaction, man. So I want to thank you. Listen, Sacha, I know you don't have a lot of time, but when I was editing the last video, you talked about a specific incident that happened in 1997. I'm sorry, my brother. I will not leave you alone unless you unless you dive into this experience. It was the dark side of the moon, when something so drastic that happened that shifted your whole, I don't even know what's this, a perception, consciousness, maybe, please, even if for an hour. I know that you said that it would take like a whole other podcast. Can you please dive into that, man?
So the best way I can approach the answer in good faith is to say initially that it is my contention that every human being goes through passes through a similar cross that I went through in 1997. It was late 1997 in my case. And I believe that every human being, one way or the other, meets with themselves in an event horizon in life, which is a complete reboot scenario where you're invited to die and be reborn. In simple terms, I'm talking about the death, the resurrection. I'm talking about the phoenix. I'm talking about, in a sense, what happened, in the story of Master Jesus in his life, this death, this resurrection from the death. And that is a story that is an element that is connected to the story of every man. I know that that's the truth. You could be a truck driver in Wisconsin with an IQ of 43. It doesn't matter. You are going to be met in the course of your life with the Rubicon. You're going to have to cross that indivisible line into yourself or not. At some point, it'll be offered to you in life through an event. It could be a near-death experience. It could be a calamitous car accident. Where you were disembodied and discarnate for momentarily. It could be that your wife runs off with your best friend and takes the 3 kids with her. It could be your beloved dies in your arms. It could be any number of things. That could be a great fire in Los Angeles where you lose your family home and everything that you've ever cherished goes up in the apocalyptic flames, and that becomes your reckoning. The event, the unthinkable, the event that destroys the bedrock of your self-identity and brings you into the most raw and naked state that you've ever been, whereupon you will either die, literally, mind, body, and soul, collapse, cave in, have a stroke, have a heart attack, jump off a building, or you resurrect in that event horizon. And in my particular case, in '97, that occurred, and I was forced into a reckoning with self or not. And in my particular case, that was the middle of the afternoon, and it happened, and I'd felt for at least a couple of years that this event was looming. Some line in the sand would meet with me, and it would be a reckoning, and I knew it would be a spiritual, metaphysical event. That it would, because as a child I had horrible experiences of demonic forces trying to hack into me, as many of us do when we're younger. And I'd had that, especially from the age of about 7 to about 14, that period, that second life cycle of mine, about 7 to 14 was the worst period of my life, in a sense, because I was, as many young people are, especially young people who have a spiritual mission in life, you come under savage attack from the demonic realms. At that time, you're normally very vulnerable and open to those attacks. Many people will relate to exactly what I'm saying. So I'd had those experiences, and then by the age of 15, as I came out of that passage as a youth, I started having angelic experiences, because I'd won that 7-year passage. In a sense, I'd gone through that rite of passage. I hadn't been hacked into, even though those hacks were happening on a daily and weekly basis. It hadn't happened. I was intact one way or the other. My angelic essence was intact by the age of 14 and 15. So then I started having 16, 17, 18, 19. I started having these angelic experiences, and literally full-fledged experiences with the angelics, and where I'd be taken out of body and recalibrated, and I was able to play with the hyperdimensional physics. I was able to see and observe and play with the fabric of superluminal reality. Let me put it that way. When you are disembodied, but you are in your star body star body is your body. You can see and touch it, and you can then see your physical mortal body on the ground, and you're in your star body. So you enter into a bilocation state of being, but you're in the star body and you're in your physical body at the same time, and they're both separate. But the one is material, is third density, is dross, and the other one is superluminal. And I played with that fabric of the hyperdimensional realm in these angelic experiences, and that imbued me with song and with poetry and with art. So I became a musician essentially the first time I had one of these angelic experiences. Song was put into me, and I was able to compose, able to write, able to think in terms of music. And my music thing lasted 9 years. And then the gift left me overnight as well. So it came to me overnight and left overnight. Wow. And it was a period of time that was given to me, I believe, as a dispensation in order to move through the anger that I had from being a war child, and the horrors that I'd been through as a child in the first 16, 17 years of my life. So the music thing was a way for me to decompress that anger, that fire, and diffuse it in a healthy way, which wouldn't end up being a metastasizing cancer or turn my character into a demonic, aggressive, nasty piece of shit human being. So that music, I now know that I was given the gift for a 9-year period in order to diffuse that fire and diffuse the traumas and so on of my youth. So I then got through that passage, but there was still a sense that some event was coming in my life. Some major event was going to come, and I was having premonitions of it, and I knew it was a death, a major one, and it happened. It happened one fine day, middle of the afternoon, and I literally saw the material universe bifurcate into two. I was in the living room in my apartment in London, and I quite literally saw the hyperdimensional realms fall into the third density, limited visible spectrum of light that we normally inhabit. And as that occurred, I could see the right hemisphere completely fall away and become this gaping abyss, literally. And I was standing in my living room, and the left-hand side was normal, was the room, was the light coming through the windows, was everything normal, and the right-hand hemisphere, the right-hand side was split down the middle and became this epic galactic void. Wow. Which was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I was on the razor's edge between the two of these, the third density illusory realm of reality, so-called reality, and this monumental void. And the next thing that happened was I fell into a death state, and some bizarre non otherworldly, I'll put it that way, otherworldly experiences occurred connected to blue light, blue orbs, and what have you. And the next thing, I was lying prostrate. I'd fallen back into my bedroom because I was in a state of psychic siege and major panic. And I knew that I was undergoing now a shamanic death, and that there was no master to catch me. There was no angelic. There was nothing that could catch me. This was going to be an alpha omega experience. And the only thing I could do was grab a amethyst that I had on the mantelpiece as I was backing toward my bedroom, and I grabbed the amethyst. It was a beautiful purple amethyst, and I fell back into my room, fell onto the bed because I knew I was going to collapse either way physically. And fortunately, I landed on the bed, had the amethyst with me, and placed the amethyst on my on this this part of me. So why I never cover this part of me? It's not because I think I've got a beautiful chest. I certainly don't, but I never cover this part of my chest. I cannot.
Wow.
And that's the only reason why I will never cover that part of me with clothing. And the only time I ever did that was when I was hacking into the United Nations and had to wear, on occasion, a suit and tie. And occasionally, when I have to do ceremonial stuff here in Indonesia, and I have to wear a kind of a uniform, I will also do the honor of wearing the uniform and that stuff. But other than that, you'll never see me covering my chest. And that amethyst on my chest sat there. I went through this bizarre experience connected to the blue light, and I knew that I was undergoing a full death, a psychic death, put it that way. The curious thing is that the amethyst became completely bleached white. That was a phenomenon that occurred. It bleached white. I still have that amethyst, and it is completely white. It went from being deep, amethyst purple, a stone which was millions of years old, to being completely bleached white. That for me was a very interesting phenomenon, because after the fact I thought, well, Christ, can you imagine what kind of power, force that moves into you? And I knew the force was coming into me from out there. That's certainly how it felt. It didn't feel as though it was an internal. And yet, as I fell into this death experience, I had this huge, how do I put it? This omniscient, immanent voice of reason, the kind of God logic came into me, and it simply said, it's my highest counsel, I guess. And it said to me, listen, either you move into this experience fully, and you die fully to this experience, and then see what you see in earnest and in good faith, or you can choose to filter this experience. You can choose to buffer it and to filter it. And to filter, which most of us do most of the time, we choose to filter the experiences because we're too, in that sense, afraid of the full spectrum experience of meeting ourselves. Right? It's what I think it was. Nelson Mandela who mentioned that. The one thing we're truly afraid of is meeting with our own majesty, meeting our own highest self. That's the thing that terrifies most of us. And I think that that's absolutely true, because, and here's the thing, when you meet with yourself, truly, you're meeting with God. You're meeting with yourself as a son or a daughter of God, and the immanent light of that experience is normally too unbearable. Certainly, if you are, if you're holding the dragon in the blood, and if you're holding too much shade, in contrast, internally, you're going to hurt like hell when you see that light, that superluminal light burns, it sears, and so, to my credit, as I was falling into this black void, um, I had this God logic saying to me, you can filter this experience now to some extent, or you can choose to fall backward into it completely naked and surrender fully to this experience in a state of pure witness. And I knew instantly that the truest and most honorable thing to do was to go fully into the experience and not try to hold on to anything, but to backward somersault into the abyss with eyes wide open in a state of abject witness. And I did, to my credit, I had the courage to do that. It's the only courageous thing I've probably ever done in my life. Well, no, I also went and spent a night in the pyramid in Egypt on my own in 1999. That was 2 years later, which was an incredibly courageous thing to do. And I would never recommend it to anyone. But that was certainly the most courageous thing I'd done to date, was to fall back into that death state and not try to filter it, but actually be fully present, just with a question like, where does this unbearable death take me? And then what happened, to answer the question in long form, is that it took me to, the only way I can describe it, Naz, is it took me to the dark side of the moon, because the next thing I knew, I was moving around the dark side of the moon, albeit we're talking about a psychic journey, because my body was on a bed somewhere in Willesden Green in England, Midsummer's Day, 1990, well, late summer, early autumn in 1997. And so the moon, don't ask me why, I knew nothing about the moon prior to that experience. I know that there was a period of about 2 weeks where I was all but gaga and practically spoon-fed. But what I was doing in real terms was galvanizing on the other side of the moon a journey, a slow psychic journey, circumnavigating the dark side of the moon and then coming back to Earth from the moon. And it's a journey which I was having with full actualized sensory alacrity, complete focus, absolute focus, more real than you and me talking right now. This is the curious thing, is when you're in the state of grace, you are truly alive and truly experiencing. And so moving back to Earth from the dark side of the moon, I had learned a certain language. I couldn't put it into syntax or words, but it was a certain language, which I now recognize as being the subliminal language that unifies all intelligences in the cosmos through kind of telepathic entrainment or attunement. It's got nothing to do with words, which I've always subsequently referred to as spells and bonds, because that's all that words are, is spells and bonds. But coming back toward the Earth, I could see the Earth and this beautiful little pearl plane of existence. And as I'm moving back toward the Earth through this perception of deep space, the planet Mercury came into view, just moved into view. Now, I knew that was Mercury because you are imbued again with this sublime language of the superluminal, where it is what it is, and it doesn't need discussion or investigation or negotiation. It was just absolute. It was absolutely Mercury. And so the presence of Mercury, the planet, makes itself felt, and it comes and eclipses the Earth from me. So I'm slowly moving back toward the Earth, and Mercury is standing there. Thank you. And Mercury is coming into view and eclipsing Earth, and stopped my passage back to Earth. So for a period of time, and I don't know whether it was 12 hours or 5 days, I am blocked from moving back through this death into resurrection. I'm blocked by the planet Mercury. And Mercury, I guess, is challenging me at that kind of psycho-spiritual level. And eventually, I clearly unlock the code at the psychic level, whereupon Mercury moves to the side and says, okay, continue on your way. And I don't want to get into that too much, because it's taken many years and I still haven't decoded it. But Mercury moves to the side and I'm allowed to continue my passage toward Earth. And I see the Earth coming toward me. And as I'm hurtling towards Earth now, exponentially faster and faster, I see the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere are dislocated.
Prove to me that you are alive.
I can literally see the Northern Hemisphere moving in a centrifugal spin, and I can see the Southern Hemisphere in a centripetal spin. So there are two hemispheres that are disjointed, and it's clear to me. And then as I'm moving in, I can see the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere have become bifurcated into the primary archetypal masculine and feminine elements. And as I'm moving toward the earth, I see that the Northern Hemisphere is a king, a huge, titanic, gargantuan king, sleeping, snoring, fast asleep with this enormous essence of patrimony and immense power, but asleep. And he's even snoring. I can hear the sounds like volcanoes and rolling thunder. And I see this archetypal king as the whole of the northern hemisphere of the planet asleep. And then the southern hemisphere I see as this awakening feminine presence, this Gaia, this Tara, this immensely beautiful but terrifyingly powerful feminine, dark, dangerous, destructive, and beautiful and sensitive and loving and sensual at the same time. And she's awakening. And then I hear her say, through this immanent God logic, she says, hear me, my king. All I hear her saying, hear me, my king. And I'm hurtling towards the earth, coming closer and closer. And again, it's a long period of time. And he doesn't do anything. He's just mumbling and muttering and snoring and fast asleep. Then again, I hear her say, hear me, my king. And he's not awakening. He's still fast asleep. And at that point, I'm screaming as I'm hurtling back to earth, and I'm screaming to him. I'm appealing to him to awaken. I'm saying, wake the fuck up, wake up. Then a long period of time, and then finally, the last time, she says, hear me, my king, or I will make myself heard. And that was the piece when I then started to hurtle into apocalypse, and I could see 9/11. I could see all these different things happening in the future. And it was absolutely terrifying. It was terrifying. And the I saw fire horn come up in North America, fire coming up in Manhattan, which was the 9/11 thing. It was like the belly of the king was punched with this fiery horn that came through, and then all hell broke out on the surface of the earth. And I came into this apocalyptic hoo-ha and awoke within my body and kind of began to resurrect myself. It took me all but 2 years to resurrect. 97 throughout 1998, throughout 1999, essentially, I was recalibrating. I had, at that point, moved largely to Morocco and was taken in by very good people there in North Africa, and rebuilt my psyche, rebuilt my life in a sense, and I sat in the Moroccan sun, and some magical things happened to me there, which I won't go into now, which completely programmed me into where I had to go and what I had to do, leading me through geometry and mathematics. So the mathematics piece I'll just speak to momentarily. When I did resurface in this resurrection, my own personal shamanic rebirth in 97, I came back holding a code, and the code was an equation, which is Z equals Z squared plus C. I had no idea what that meant. Prior to that experience, I had no affinity to mathematics, but having traversed the dark side of the moon, come back to Earth through this 2-week passage, so to speak, of resurrection, all I was holding was the Z equals Z squared plus C equation. It was the only way I could explain what had happened to me over that couple of weeks. And I then found out within a few weeks that Z equals Z squared plus C was an actual equation, which was conjured by the great mathematician Bernard Mandelbrot. The Mandelbrotian, which is fractality, is the essence of fractality. So if you understand, now I'm something of an expert on the Z equals Z squared plus C and the Mandelbrotian M-set mathematics, and became the kind of premise of how I rebuilt my life, and then all the work that I do through Humanitad Foundation and the New Earth Project and what have you. It's beautiful, and it's connected also to the water molecule. If one gets to it, and then understanding that we are all of us fractal. We're living in a fractal cosmos, and these torsion and scalar mechanics are really the language that we need to familiarize ourselves with if we are to scientifically or logically or mathematically get to the premise of pure truth, which is that we are God and us are the same. There is no separation. The trial of separation was the great myth. And imposition of the idea of time, tick-tock time, 1260 time, was a software installation. This is connected to Zeus and Cronus and the Lords of Time, the Archons, all of that. At some point, if I can find the time, I'll write this in a little book to put it out there. But thus far, I've been too busy being in the trenches and rushing around in this temporal realm, doing the work that I feel called to do, which is to the hereditary redemption, something I'm just involved with right here this week in Indonesia. And that's why I'm here. But there are things that I'm too busy doing to be able to take off 3 weeks and go and write a book. But I would love at some point to try to put this stuff down, because I think it might help some folks make sense of the madness of so-called reality. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that I haven't been too enigmatic. I just tried to describe my journey, not in biblical ways, not that I'm trying to lay claim that my story is remarkable, more remarkable than anyone else's, because I know that that's not the case. And when I tour, if you met any member of my audience, you will know that every time I speak in the public domain to a large room of people, and that's very, very often, I will underscore the point and the fact that each one of us have a story, and our story is the hero's journey, each of us, and everyone's story is extraordinary. It is just extraordinary. I don't care who you are, from what bracket in life you come from, how cloistered and secular or miserable or poverty-stricken or wondrous your life is. Each of us has the most extraordinary story to tell. And that's the one thing I've learned in life, having thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations with people and learning as much as I can. So I'm this whole business of each of us is a fractal of the Godhead, and that the entirety of creation, in a sense, and the emancipation of the enlightenment, the true ascension of humanity is contingent and dependent on every single one of us. So no one gets left behind in that sense.
Wow, man, that was remarkable, and that was beautiful. So what I am, trying to not understand, but kind of trying to know through everything that you just shared. And again, thank you so much. I know that something of that caliber is probably coming back by pieces throughout time. And I know you said that it took you 2 years to kind of put yourself back together, because for a lot of people, if you understand, what words can't really describe what Sacha was just saying, that basically you get destroyed, like everything that your ego has built, in this so-called what you think reality, all of a sudden just gets smashed into small little pieces, and you find yourself in the absolute. What I'm wondering is, obviously this was the reincarnation that, you were supposed to go through these things. Have you looked back, or are you able to look back into your past lives? Like, do you know the path that you were taking along the way from your past lives to now?
No, I have no recollection at all of any past life. I have no recollection of being in this world, none whatsoever. And I've spoken to this a number of times about, the ancient Greeks spoke to the cup of Lethe, the cup of forgetfulness, which each of us are required more or less to drink before we descend into this world. And for sure, I drank the whole flagon because I have less than zero recollection of any previous life. I've never had any connection. But curiously enough, so I don't have any affinity to this world per se that I can recall. But having said that, I also have a strange dichotomy that I've had to deal with in my life. One, having a liquid memory fluid that goes back to when I was a matter of weeks old, sitting in a carry cot in Africa as a fairly newly born child, couldn't have been older than 6 months or something. And from that time, more or less, I've got a fluid memory, an absolutely fluid memory. Now, I did a number of years ago lose my memory in 1999. Between 1997, that experience of that psychic death, and 1999, when I went into the Great Pyramid in Egypt one night, and I gained access there to do the I guess, enactment of the death and the resurrection, which I clearly got wrong in many ways in my naivety. But that period of 2 years, 97, 98, 99, I did lose my memory. So from that experience that I just described to you, a slow, steady kind of black bank of clouds started rolling in to me, which took up until I think late 1999, and I knew that this bank of clouds was moving in toward me and was ultimately going to annihilate my memory banks, which it did. And in point of fact, I phoned a friend of mine in Egypt and I said, "Listen, can I come and stay with you?" I was living between Morocco and Egypt at that time. I said, "Can I stay with you? Because I'm feeling as though something not bad is going to happen, but something otherworldly. I'm literally losing my memory. I can't remember anything. And I know that I have to go through whatever's coming and I need to be okay one way or the other. Can I?" And he said, "Sure, come and stay with me." And I did, in a place called Mohandassine in Egypt, which is where this event happened. And as this bank of kind of psychic clouds moved in, they did literally roll over me. And just before it hit the maximum, I had psychically summoned myself up sufficiently to have the courage to go one night to Giza Plateau.
Can you talk about that? I'm sorry. Can you please talk about that? Because in the Slavic, I'm so sorry, because like in a Slavic, tradition, we have this thing. Well, the ancients had this thing where we had dalmane, which are dolmens, which you would go every like 30 or so years. You would go into these stoned constructions where you would go to die and be reborn. So what was that Giza experience like? What I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's so interesting. What was that?
Let me just retrace my steps. So I summoned up the psychic, in the first instance, the psychic strength to do it, because it's not something that you can do lightly if you are attuned and sensitive in the psychic realms. It can be a terrifying experience. But I'd already been through the death and rebirth thing in 97. So I did have that as a marker to go by. So now, and that was an unwitting thing that happened to me in 97. So now here I am 2 years later, 1999, and I am willfully now moving into a death and rebirth. Okay, it's the second rite of passage, but this one I'm choosing to do. And there's a difference there. So it's taking it to the next level. You're dialing up your experience in a sense. And so took me weeks to conjure up the courage, but at the same time, I was losing my memory, and I knew that I was going to be whited out by whatever was coming, and that it was going to annihilate. That egoic principle was going to be annihilated. I knew that. And so I went to Giza that one night, got a taxi to take me out there, bribed the guards, and they allowed me in. And I went down into the king's chamber. And in those days, let me tell you about Egypt. In those days, there was only one, and I am not joking. There was one long fluorescent light bulb in the long gallery. That was it. That was it. And we didn't have smartphones in those days. I had some little torch with me, and one flickering luminescent bulb in the long gallery. That was it. The rest, you were literally embedded in the heart of darkness, with millions and millions of tons of granite above you in the greatest edifice apparently ever built on the surface of the earth, with the psychic imprint and embed of billions of souls, the attention of the cosmos, all of this incredible noise. embedded into the granite of the pyramid. And here you are on your own, completely on your own. And you're forced into a reckoning. And I'm part proud and part embarrassed by how I conducted myself in that experience. But I did stay the distance. I did get into the chamber. I did not lie down into the sarcophagus thingy. I did not lie into that. Had I done so, I probably would have shot out of body and not come back. I now understand sufficiently about what that chamber was all about. Thousands and thousands of years ago, that was a portal to ascension, that Akhenaten was using that. And I think he salvaged 250,000 souls, moved into perfect enlightenment through that technology at that time, before Akhenaten was closed down by the other lords of time. Nonetheless, all of the embed and the imprint of that stuff is in that space. And I did stay the distance. And then just as dawn was breaking, I lost my nerve and fled to try to find the exit and get and climb up those last stairs. But on the gallery, I was stopped. I was blocked by these lines of archons. I don't know what they were. They were sentinels, and they were big, black, scary sentinels, and they came out of the walls, the granite walls, and they literally blocked my passage. So this was like running the gauntlet, and I was utterly terrified. And these beings, I can't remember if there were a dozen or 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen of them, but they were certainly 20 plus foot tall and smoky and black, and they were clearly a sentinel force, and they literally fell out of the granite walls and blocked my passage. So there was no possible way of me moving through them until I did the reckoning. Again, this is the compression point. And the compression point was that I had to qualify that fear, that impulse, that reflex of fear within myself before I was allowed to move. And I knew that. I had no choice. And so I did, because in a situation like that, you're forced into it. So I immediately released identification from fear, knowing that that was the only way out of this conundrum. And at that point, they dissipated back into the granite, and I was given free passage, and I was able to then leave, not run this time, not flee, but measured, walk, leave in my state of grace, in my power. And that helped me hugely later in life. So that became, in a sense, the recalibration of my inner powers, my immanent powers, and my psychic powers. Put it that way. That was the gift that these archonic motherfuckers left or imprinted in me in that particular experience. So I then went up, and as I was going up the stair, you could see dawn coming through, and I came out into the sunrise, and it was a complete rebirth. It was just incredible, and I was so deeply, deeply empowered, and I guess proud of myself for having willfully undertaken a death and rebirth, because I'm not a courageous man in that sense. I wouldn't get in a hot air balloon, for instance, and I wouldn't do parkour, jump from one building to another, even although I can do things like that. I'm very agile. I would never do things. I'm not courageous. I don't volunteer myself into dangerous, death-defying situations.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
But I was proud of myself that day, and I went back, and I was reborn. And slowly but surely, I did lose my memory, incidentally. It was a kind of line in the sand, psychic cleansing. But then I started to rebuild. And then that's when I learned that the distinction between the false light matrix and vibral light is why I speak in those terms. I'm very true, the way that I speak, and I'm very, consistent. If you go back and listen to any of my waffling 12, 13, 14 years ago, when I started, I never did any public speaking until I think 2012. This is when I decided to come out of the closet, and that's 14 years ago. And I have been very, very consistent since that time in my syntax and the words I use. There's a distinction between false light and vibral light. And And I learned that distinction through that death and rebirth experience in Egypt. But to answer your question that you raised a moment ago with a little bit more scientific backing, let me just say that the paramagnetic stone, granite is a crystal, is the silica. So essentially, you're talking about a monumental antenna. That's what that pyramid and those other stones that you're speaking about, which are all around the world, whether it's Stonehenge or it doesn't matter. The stone granite is an antenna. It's a silica crystal antenna that is connected to the paramagnetic forces and telluric forces of the earth on the one hand, and also connected on the surface of the earth, especially the pyramid, to the dielectric forces of the cosmos, of the dielectric universe. And so when you create a piece of geometry like a pyramid, and you understand the ratios, the 60 degrees and the 52-degree ratios, you understand that you are creating a seriously dynamic capacitor of marrying the forces of the universe to the forces of the earth into a perfect point of plasma eruption, where you are literally supercharging, the environment, and you can harness, in that sense, the forces of the universe and obviously the paramagnetic forces of the earth, the inner earth. You could harness them into a given quanta, then you can take that power and do something with it. The question is, what do you do with it? Well, in the case of Akhenaten, he directed that in such a way as to create the Jacob's ladder for the enlightenment of hundreds of thousands of Egyptians at that time, who he was taking out of the wheel of samsara, out of this Ouroboros of life and death and reincarnation, because he knew that this cycle of life and death is actually a harvest cycle, and that even when we die, we're getting harvested into the heavens and the hells and being stationed there for a period of time until the laws of entropy pull us back into another incarnation, but where we become again leached and harvested by subliminal forces. So how do we, as sentient beings, souls, leave that wheel of samsara altogether? That, of course, has been the age-old conundrum. And the Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha, of course, speaks to that. The Master Jesus in his life and time speaks to that. Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, speaks to that. All great avatars and saints and prophets speak to that same conundrum, which is how the proverbial fuck do we exit the matrix, exit the wheel of samsara, and move into bodhisattva, a state of permanent grace, wherein we have the exit strategy, or we've got the codes to be able to move into our true superluminal state of being, and not simply caught up in this harvest cycle of life, death, follow the light at the end of the tunnel, get parked into another hologram called heaven or a hologram called hell, and then the same repeat. So that's where we're at now. We're at this axiomatic point at the meta level, where we are going to be, as an entire genus, humanity, we're going to be transmogrified from being squawking, grunting hominids into becoming superluminal, resurrected angelics. That's what this time, end of time denotes and signifies. And to those of us who are in a state of grace sufficiently and disidentified from the wheel of samsara, from the dialectic of duality, of the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil, those of us who have sufficiently evolved psycho-spiritually to disidentify ourselves from that shit show of reality, and of inhabiting a state of witness, a state of grace, which is to say non-identification and non-judgment, we are the ones who will be able to now determine the outcome as we anchor patterns of perfection to this world and resurrect, in that sense, the kingdom of heaven on earth. Excuse that motorcycle in the rice fields there.
I have to stoop down to my my street New Yorker self and say, in the best possible ways, man, you are crazy as shit. Like for going into the pyramid, man. You know, it's when you say you had these out of body experiences. Every time, this is the second time that we're having this connection. You kick my ass out of the body when you're, talking about all these things. You know what it looks like to me at the whole time you're talking is, or what it feels like to me is that a lot of times people on the search of the knowing, they temper with different things, let's say like ayahuasca or amanita muscaria, whatever it is, like they're knocking the door to the absolute. And what it feels like to me is that throughout your journey, the absolute has been grabbing you and kind of like pulling you out, and it's you're not even knocking. It's like the absolute is coming for you. What I wanted to ask, have you ever stepped aside and looked at your being as someone else, meaning throughout this, great story, this human story, we had Christ, we had Prince Siddhartha, Buddha, we had all these great teachers. Where do you put yourself in this great human story? If I know that, you never speak out of the ego, but if you would to tap into your inner self and kind of answer this question, where do you put yourself in this great human story?
Prove to me that you are alive.